So my names are Koech Oscar, as you can see, and we were implementing research on pasture production within the ASALs, that is Bura Irrigation Scheme and Katido Irrigation Schemes in Turkana. And that's the title. This is a big title for our cases, and I'll present part of what we have done at the field and so on. So those are some of the people who are working together in this particular project. I will not dwell much on this because this is more important at the proposal stage, and we all know this information that African drylands have been facing a lot of challenges in terms of food security, and the frequent droughts, of course, has been devastating to the livelihoods of these particular people in those particular areas, where we know that livestock production is the main economic activity within these particular areas, and that's the contribution to the national GDP, and 10% and 40% of the agricultural GDP. And not forgetting that in these particular areas, 90% of employment opportunities is from livestock industry, and about 95% of the family incomes is directly derived from livestock. So we can't ignore livestock production and dwell much on crops and so on in the same areas. That's the potential productivity of these particular areas, 212 billion annually. That's according to ILRI. And we are not attaining this because of the constraints in terms of annual mortalities, because of quantity and quality of feed that the animals are getting. And an estimate of about 2 billion is lost annually just because of the deaths from the droughts and so on. And that's some of the pictures we usually see on the TVs before we call for Kenyans. And at the end, this is the end where we usually end up trying to supply relief food, which will not be the case. And ideally, I came up with this kind of complex, irrigated agriculture complex. We have been trying to think about croplands and diversifying crops. And most of the schemes, of course, we know are found in the drylands. Bura, we have Turkana, and so on. Yes, we know crops are important and good, but these guys have the value for the livestock. And that's their main thing they've been doing over years and years. And we can't say that we can detach them from that and avoid considering that. And the water is a resource, crops are our resources, livestock are our resources. We have the pastures there, which is also part of our resources. And human beings, we are utilizing all these kind of resources. And we can't say that there is no interrelationship between the different kind of resources that human beings directly derive their livelihoods. As you can see, there is the benefits of livestock and crop in terms of nutrient flows and so on. The same thing, water that we are trying to use for our irrigation in crops. This water is not only for the crops. The animals need water, and we have seen conflicts arising from livestock keepers and crop farming because of water challenges. So we need to look on a way that we can try to make this system work as a whole, not trying to put a barrier or a break in one of them. I know personally, Zaria, I'll be more happy to get your comments. And if this system is complete, then that's the kitchen of Kenya. And in that kitchen, that Kenyan will want some milk, and the animals will want some food. So if that one is done, then we expect the stores of these farmers to be having food at the same time, food for the animals. And that's why we are going at this particular time. Even the government, we know of fodder banks and so on, as we'll be looking later at for the livestock. So my study was basically trying to look at how can we bring pasture production within these particular irrigation schemes. And the challenge was which pastures in the first place. We know Bura, salt, and so on, and we want to start pasture production. Then which species are we going to produce? That was the first question. And I went there with the 6 selected grass species that are naturally growing in the rangelands, as I'll be looking at it later. And basically, you're trying to put a break or trying to avoid a situation whereby during dry seasons we are trying to ferry grass from Narok to Garissa to other areas. Very many kilometers, trucks moving with hay, bought at 200 shillings and being sold at 800 shillings, which is not economic at all. So production of this, the same fodder within those areas that will reduce the transport cost and also ensure that the farmers are getting, or the pastoralists are getting, high quality forage at the right time as well, before they start experiencing the deaths and so on. So those were the broad objectives basically for the whole study, but today I'm presenting objective 1 and part of objective 3, the productivity in terms of biomass yields and aspects of quality that were more, that have been achieved so far. So I did the study in Bora irrigation scheme and Katilu irrigation scheme in Turkana, and that was the design, 6x4 factorial. I had 2 treatments here, watering schedule. We know what is one of the limiting, what is one of the challenges that we are facing in the dry areas in terms of irrigation. So we are trying to look at this species productivity under different irrigation levels. That was 80%, 50%, and 30% of the field capacity within the soil. To get that field capacity, I was using gypsum blocks, a technology that you easily determine the amount of moisture in the soil and determine whether to irrigate or not to irrigate. Then the second treatment was the 6 grass species. Then data collection on primary productivity and water and so on were also collected. So here is some of the preliminary results that I have. You can see the different bars, lines are showing different species of grasses. And this is at the highest moisture level, the 80% of the field capacity. We can see this Sobe Sudan grass being at the top. And the second one is Chloris Guyana, and the rest that are there as well. So from that, it's interesting that this Chloris Guyana, this is the rose grass, shows continuous production of above 10,000 kilograms per hectare at all the irrigation levels. That means either much water or less water, the productivity didn't change much, and there was no significant difference between the yields. That tells you can still produce the same amount with lower water supply. Sudan grass does better with high moisture, but at 30% field capacity, lower moisture level, the productivity went down. So it can only do better when the moisture level are very high. Then we have Cercus ciliaris and the Cercus ciliaris and the Anthropogon macrostachys. These are the 2 species which produce these biomass yields with highest moisture content, and does best at 50%, but when it went to 30, it also declined. The other species was Ragrostis superba, which didn't show any difference when you have high moisture content and low moisture content. And some of these grasses, note that they are range grasses that have evolved in the natural environment where there is always droughts, some moisture and so on. So they have developed some resistance to droughts and so on, and adapted to low moisture supply. When you look at the quality, because productivity doesn't mean anything, because the animals need to eat, that's why we eat quality diet, and the animals too need to have a good diet that they're getting. I looked at quality in terms of crude protein, which is one of the key things we consider in livestock production, because this is a parameter that is used to show the quality of the feed. And interestingly, or some interesting result is that all the forages had above minimum crude protein of above 7% at week 14. And it's only one species, Sudan grass, that showed lower than 7%. That was after week 16. So the quality is not a problem in terms of raising the animals by providing the required crude protein that is needed per day. Then from the farm I went into the animal, into the rumen, and linking that with the quality. This is done in the lab, like those titration and so on. But now that doesn't end there, because the animal eats the forage, and we need to know what happens. I went into Insako, dry matter digestibility, of the same sample that I took, put them in the rumen of the animal, and look at the in vivo, the digestibility within the animal itself. And you can see that at different harvest stages, because I was also trying to look at what is the best time to harvest, and the quality changes also with time, because we are thinking of harvesting and so on, and storage as well. So the quality at different weeks, we see that digestibility was reducing with the growth of the grasses, or with maturity of the grasses. That was expected, of course, because of the issues of the structural cell walls and so on, developing the growth and so on. And Sudan grass and Chloris Guyana declines faster with maturity. That is, the digestibility decline faster with maturity. And there's these real range grasses, the Sencras, Chloris Guyana, Ragnosis superba, and Sencras hilaris, which showed higher dry digestibility even at week 16. And that was quite interesting. The seed yields, I was also going into the seed yields. Probably we'll be talking of how to upscale this. And pasture seeds is one of the business that is taking shape in this country. That's the result that I got from the seed yields. We have Sudan grass, which shows significant decline in seed yields at lower moisture levels. So if you're planting this grass for seeds, then we don't need to irrigate much water, because with higher moisture levels, the seed declined. I'm yet to know why. And Chloris Guyana and Clorox showed higher seed yields at lower moisture levels. Others producing more seeds at more moisture levels. And Sencras had lowest yield with no significant difference in both irrigation schedules. So it didn't matter how much water or less water, the seed yields was almost the same. Then we have Eragrostis and Tropogon agrostachys, which had no significant difference in seed yields across the irrigation levels as well. So to a farmer, I know there are farmers here, and we were told the farmers are here. This doesn't make sense to any farmer, maybe probably because it's our problem as scientists. But their problem is what I'm going to look at now. Returns from biomass, of course. I picked on the two species because of the high productivity in terms of biomass. That was Sudan grass and Chloris Guyana. And I looked at two harvest stages, at 3 months, which is 12 weeks, and 16 weeks, which is 4 months. And those are the kilograms that I got at those respective stages. And I converted that into the number of bells, probably, by, the calculation, how standard bell is like 17 kilograms. And I found that 556 bells from at week 12 from Sudan grass, and 466 from Chloris Guyana, the same thing at week 16, and so on. Then I used, probably I went on the lower side, selling this to the local farmers at the local level. 150 shillings a bell. We know it's always higher, 200 or 250. I don't know how much it is in your place, but I used a lower value to calculate the sales of the same bells of hay. And I was getting 83,505, 120,564, and similarly to Chloris Guyana, the same. And this is from 1 hectare of the same grasses. And these are perennial grasses, so there are more harvests to follow after that, the second and the third as well. So the cost, plowing is about 300 a hectare. I think fertilizer I only used 1 bag, in fact half of it. Then the labor was what I didn't capture. Well, probably farmers themselves will be using that and so it's up to the farmer to do the calculation and compare this with the cropping and so on, and factor in the issues of continuous production after regrowth. Then more interesting seed production. Here, these two grasses are actually sold by Kenya Seed, Sudan grass and Chloris Guyana. And they sell 600 shillings a kilogram. From the yields that I got, that's how much you can make on that, 750,639. But to this species specifically, but to the other species that I have, I didn't put it that way because it was much for the presentation and so on. There is the other range grasses that a kilo is going for more than 1,000 Kenyan shillings. Somebody from Marigat, I realized you're here, will talk later, and he can easily tell you what they're doing in Marigat. Pasture seed sales, and there's very high demand. Somalia is coming for this country asking for tons and tons of range grass pastures for rehabilitation and so on, and it's good money per kilo as well. Then if the farmer doesn't want to sell the grass or make the hay to sell, probably he wants to raise his animals. So he'll be more keen on how much do I need for my animal for how long. So I used the tropical livestock units to calculate how much 1 hectare yields could sustain the animal for 3 months. And when I looked at the harvest at 12 and 16 weeks, those are the kilograms, those are the number of bells that we had earlier. And we find that based on the animal daily requirements, 16 animals can be raised when you harvest at 12 weeks for Sudan grass, and 24 animals at 16 weeks for the same species. And also with the Chloris Guyana, 14 animals for 3 months for Chloris Guyana at 12 weeks, and the same 16 weeks you can raise 19 animals. for 3 months without putting any, just giving them what you harvested from your farm, and the animals will be okay for the 3 months. And when we think of 3 months, it could be shorter for you, but we are talking about irrigated pasture production. Then we have a continuous production for the whole year, that is the 12 months. So in a year, if we are producing 1 hectare, giving us 14 animals for 3 months, then in a year we will only need those same 14 animals for the 12 months, isn't it? And assuming that we are selling 1 animal at 280, at 20,000 Kenya shillings. So that's about 280,000 shillings from this particular livestock. Then I went ahead and I was just visioning, the government wants us to move into a quarter of the 1 million hectares. That means about 250,000 hectares under livestock production. So those hectares that the government is dreaming of can produce these 3,500,000 animals. And if you sell just 1 million of that 3 million, 1 million livestock, let's say offtake, then we are going to make 20 billion from the same areas. And that's how I took 1 million, because we don't sell all the animals. Of course, we need to remain with some and breeding stocks and so on. Keeping in mind that we are eliminating the losses during dry seasons and so on, and even the extra costs that we incur, and trying to adjust our budgets to meet the emergency calls. So in conclusion, I found out that moisture levels affect range grass species primary productivity differently, either positively, negatively, or it doesn't matter in terms of how much they produce per hectare. Then the seeds of the same grasses also are influenced by soil moisture levels, because we saw in some that more moisture levels, we had lower yields than when the moisture levels were low. Then there is potential for cultivating of range grasses as a source of livestock feed and income. And the final results of this study then will make much conclusion on that. Then the range grass seeds production from irrigated pasture can also be used in rangelands rehabilitation. We are not just thinking about feeding our livestock. We have a challenge in this country of rangelands being degraded. We need some grass seeds that can be used to try to rehabilitate these particular rangelands. And by doing so, we are feeding our animals in pastoral setup. We don't need to go take the grasses personally and plant in the rangelands. But we know the animals spread the seeds. And some of these seeds have disappeared in the natural environment. But the animals, in their natural grazing patterns and behaviors, they will be doing that for us. And we are going to have rehabilitation taking place within the same areas. I put this picture here when I remembered something. This is the control. This field stayed for like 5 months without anything growing when the others were growing, because I didn't irrigate it. But with some showers, this happened. So the seeds were able to stay in the soil for very many months. And many range grasses are known for this particular purpose. So even if the animals are going to spread the seeds there, somebody will ask me what will happen, because there are no rains. But in case there are rains, of course, the grasses will start growing, and we have been seeing this even in the past within the same areas. So I'll recommend we upscale this particular study or project of fodder, and I know there's goodwill for the government, and even NIB are happy about this. The picture you're seeing there are some of the grass that I harvested. I'm looking at the storage deterioration in terms of quality. What happens if I store this? Because we are talking of strategic feed resources, or the forage banks or fodder banks. We are going to store the forage. What happens? The quality changes with storage and so on. So I'm trying to look at that, what happens after every 3 months, after every 2 months, and taking samples to the lab and so on. And the species that I think we can kickstart off, sorghum bicolor, which is Sudan grass, Chloris guyana, and Eragrostis superba, because of the yields for the two. Then Eragrostis superba for the excellent seed yields, and also the crude protein was very high. So for milking herds and the young herds, is a good species to consider. Then there is technically, I've been in the field, we have done field days and so on. The pastoralists or the farmers, most of these farmers that are found within those areas, are not used to pasture production, and grasses bulking as well issues of hay baling and pasture sales and marketing, which is as well business that can be done. So there's need to have awareness, training, and so on in terms of irrigated pasture production in those particular areas. This is Eragrostis superba, excellent seed yields, and this can be used to multiply the seeds and even use it to expand the whole thing. Then I talked of we need to have fodder banks. We had our vice president talking of the fodder banks. This is in India. It's very, it's done very well for them, and they don't have any deaths in terms of droughts and so on. I'll be showing you more pictures in the next slide. So this is where the study was. At least we are not far from India. If you can ferry research material on a tractor from a 0.2 hectare plots, and those are natural spreading of the seeds on the ground within the experimental plots, and they still grow and so on. That's a picture of fodder banks in India, and you can see what they do. They know the value of their livestock and the value of their people. I put here this one to say fodder is not only about grasses. We are trying to think of including leguminous plant species for forage, because we know soil fertility is also another thing that we need to consider. How do we replenish our nitrogen and the fertility of our lands and so on? So I know somebody is here with interest to try think of issues of leguminous trees and forage materials for fodder in the same areas to improve the quality of the soil as well as the quality of the forage material for the livestock. And thank you. I acknowledge NIB for supporting this study and the University of Nairobi for providing the environment as well. Those are some of the farmers, the people who are working with me in the area, and there was social aspect. The women were very happy, and they were saying they can build many houses if we extend the fodder production in the area, because they also use the same thing to build their own homes. So, thank you.